Hi, my name is Shanda Rule. I'm a singer, storyteller, joy spreader, and host of the Courageous Voice podcast. The Courageous Voice podcast gathers and shares stories from artistic folks around the world and their journeys through fear, courageousness, and creativity. Join us and get inspired with me as we chat about learning to befriend and walk with and past our fears to share our voices courageously with the world. Today we have with us Stephane Magloire, and the English pronunciation of his last name is Magliore, which is just so fabulous. Stephane, tell me the full meaning of your given name one more time.
So Stephane, it means crowned one. So even Stephane or any variation of that. And then my last name is my glory. So in essence, my name is my crowning glory.
This is so beautiful. This is so beautiful. So Stephane is a creative director. He's a queer activist. He organizes Vienna's Queen's Brunch. Vienna is Burning, the Happily Ever After Ball. He's a writer, a singer, a traveler, an educator, a human of inspiration, as we have just been talking about. So listen, we like to really get into courageousness and the different ways that we can use our voices courageously. But first, can you tell us who you are? Because those are my words and my gleanings from our conversations and internet, and we're just getting to know each other. So who are you today in this moment?
That's a really funny question because I ask a lot of people that question because it's always interesting figuring out how I got to who I am right now. And even who I am right now was not who I was, I'd say, 2 to 3 years ago. I think if I were to describe myself, I'd say, interesting. Artist. I would say artist is the first way that I approach the world. I think the one that hits me the most is music, song. I definitely, in the various things that I do as an artist, I consider myself a singer first. Second would be writer, user of words. That's also interesting to my name as well because St. Stephen was a writer and he was actually stoned because of his teachings and what he spoke on. I would say with me, the words that I have and also the way that I approach the world comes from 3 very specific things in my life, which is one, that I'm an immigrant, so I was born in Haiti. Second, that I am queer. Specifically, I identify mostly with the gay men community. And the last is being a person of color, being a Black man. So who am I? I would say I can start in those 3 categories, but then it continues to find itself to be a lot more complex. As far as right now in 2022, I recognize that who I am specifically, I am a vessel of change for change. And I've had to take a lot of work to really begin to understand even what that means. With race, I found myself in a time in my life where I didn't even know myself as a Black person. I tried to hide and run away from it as much as I could because I found that that was the best way of protecting myself in a way. As a gay person, I realized so many privileges that I have, specifically living here in Austria, but just like as a tall person, as a Black person, there are ways that I'm able to talk about who I am as a queer man that a lot of people don't have that opportunity to do so because of whatever demographics that put them together. And then as a Haitian, I actually spent a lot of my life hiding away from it because Haiti is known as the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. As far as living in America, there's a narrative about Haiti that is extremely false. But then once I really began to understand the magic of my culture and my country and my ethnicity and the gods that are a part of it and the religion that is a part of it, and also the unimaginable, which was then liberating themselves from white supremacy has also given me a lot of strength in figuring out who I am. But who I am also changes a lot. I've lived many lives as a traveler, as a student, as a son, as an uncle, as an artist. Even just the inability to answer who I am makes me feel as if I'm actually living the life that I want to live.
Ah.
Because it's also a mystery to me, because there are many things that, at one point I thought I was going to be the premier Broadway actor with the Tony Awards and all of this. And then at one point I thought I was going to be the Quentin Tarantino of my generation and a screenwriter. There's so many things that I thought I was going to be. And in my curiosity and going into those worlds, this happened. On a small level of what I'm doing here in Vienna is already being a vessel of change and seeing certain things here as far as, I don't know. The first thing I thought of when I got to Vienna was that it's a city that's very much in the closet. That's how I read it as a gay person.
Okay.
Like a lot of parties at night, which are fun and cool, but within those parties, there's also a lot of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, no conversation on consent, self-harm, depression, suicidal ideation, suicidal intent. And this things that I began to create there, which at the time was the Big Gay Picnic with the Queen's Brunch, which is a weekly drag show that takes place at the Villa Vita Cafe, which I consider to be housed in the Rosalila Villa, which is the stone wall of Vienna, or at least how I see it. As a Black person, I found a lot of dark things, specifically first with the Black queer, right? In the sense of one being a refugee or an asylum seeker and having to prove to a government that they're gay. I don't know how that's supposed to happen, but that's a thing that I'm asked of you. To just the ways that people of color are seen, right? So whether they're the ones with the Augustine magazine selling it outside or only being able to make €3.25, I think, a day, which is what then leads them to selling drugs, right? And even on that level, I find that the people that sell drugs are actually really nice people, right? Like, if I think back to New York City drug dealers and the gang banging and the stuff, that actually doesn't happen here. It's literally just the only means that they have to be able to make money, right? There's no one other than one person that I had observed who is in a position of political power or political representation. Any of even the basic jobs, like, I don't know, at Spar or at Hofa, you don't see a person of color. And there are a lot of people of color that are here. And so my privilege as being a Black American, as being a creative that has a business, of having these amazing opportunities and working with these amazing artists of my past, I've been able to come here, and I'm not Jesus, but it is still a feeling of a bearing of a burden, right? Of assisting people to reimagine who Black people are.
Okay. And so how would you say that you're doing that in Vienna? This is interesting, because we're talking about creativity, and I think this is a different way of getting into creativity.
Right. I happen to do it on one level with the events that I'm creating. And I say events not even in the sense of parties, but having them seen as cultural marvels, like drag. The art of drag is not just a party thing. These are artists and how they put together their artistry. But at that level, I'm the creator. And so you don't really have a lot of Black creators here in Austria. And so when you come up against people that you would like to either collaborate with or hire, there's some misunderstandings or moments where you have to clearly delineate, well, I'm kind of the boss here and I make decisions. There's a lot of reactions that come to that. No one's used to these things. Even when I was working for other organizations and I was the creative director and I would show up in a space and expect to have the respect of a creative director, I would have the respect of like kind of a gopher or an assistant to something that I'm creating. So in just me doing what I do, because I'm still going to do it, it's beginning to change the minds. Right, there actually can be a Black person that is calling the shots. You have to listen to it. You can't question it. So just those types of relations I'm trying to help change.
I have a question about this because I saw something online. You did a workshop with the Ban Ki-moon. Am I saying this right? Ban Ki-moon Center.
Mhm.
And you were talking about speaking your values without using words.
Mhm.
And for some reason, the story that you're telling about creative ways to change people's minds about queerness, about race, I don't know if that plays into that, but that really stood out to me, especially thinking about creative voice, because we tend to just think, okay, like something that you can speak. And when you say how to share your values without using these words, can you talk
I
about that a
mean,
little?
especially when the Black Lives Matter movement kicked up again, a huge thing that I took away from it was this idea of use your voice. And your voice doesn't necessarily have to be what's coming out of your mouth, it's also in your actions. And so I feel like, especially now in our current times, there are a lot of people that will feed words in the same of like politicians and this, like just words, words, words. And there's nothing that's coming together with the actions to have that work. And so I realized that in all of the ways that I could have seen myself in a position of attack, whether it's verbally, emotionally, even physically, the thing about what speaks to who I am is my work. So I always allow my work to speak for itself because, especially here, I am a rare type of human that is doing the things that I'm doing. For some people, they have problems with that. That's not my concern. My concern is always thinking of it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with community. And so the main work that I do is bring communities together because I mean, there are many different types of communities that exist within this world. But I enjoy bringing ones that you would never think put together in order to begin a conversation. And so the first conversation could even be in body language, right? The next conversation then can be in words, can be in how you look at a person. But the more of that happens, something begins to change. Also taking things from outside of Austria and bringing it in, at least with my drag brunch, folks had issues with me bringing people in from the outside. And I was like, well, how can we learn about a whole drag community if we're only working with one specific thing? And a huge part of that comes from me being American.
Okay, but tell us about your concept for the drag brunch.
One has to start with where they are. So I did start working with Austrian queens. And there's some difficulty in that as well because there's not, infrastructure of people studying the arts here in that kind of way and doing that kind of work. And so you kind of figure it out through looking at things from the outside. And so for me, I come from the States. And so the States is this sort of amazing experiment, right? Where you shove a bunch of different types of people from all different countries and whatever together and see what happens. And so when I got here, I was like, yo, Europe is a little different, especially EU, because the EU has this kind of false sense of being America, but it's not because America is different states, but it's still one country where it's like, this is all these different countries that you're now putting together kind of like states. And so for me, I got here and I was like, cool, I'm ready to play drag, like mix thing. And it was like, no, the Dutch queens are all doing the Dutch place and the English are doing the English thing and the Spanish are doing the Spanish thing. And so anything that is artistic that I do comes from curiosity. So I was like, okay, I have this infrastructure, which is this brunch. I have an ability, which is even more amazing with how flights and everything work of being able, depending on the time, to fly people here at a very affordable rate. Also be able to give other people in these countries opportunities to work, especially during a whole Pandulce, that kind of work. Bringing them together and then seeing what happens. And so I had one opportunity last summer where it wasn't just like one or two queens, I could bring 10 of them together. It was a little frightening too, because of course you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, you see the things and the insecurities and the egos and this. And so I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but And so I brought them all together. Oh my God, they were exchanging stories about, all of the craziness they were going within their communities. Some of them came out as HIV positive. Some of them came out as trans. They were sharing wigs. They were sharing breastplates. They were putting each other's makeup on. And it was just a question right? And that question could have gone one of two ways. It could have also been like, they hated each other, they couldn't work together, it'll never happen again. But there's a feeling that I also have with regards to the art that I do. And that's also because at one moment I was able to work with Kanye West, which is great. But the payout from that one gave me an opportunity to travel the world. And so I had done 2 around the world where I was able to go to all these different communities to collect art practices from these different communities. And also in what we're talking about here, which is the courageous voice, I specifically focused on queer community art. And so that came with drag, that came with visual artists, that came with singers, that came with writers, dancers, and in some really crazy places. The hangups that I find here in Vienna, Austria, within the queer community, you go to somewhere like Yangon, Myanmar, right? Where it like literally in the laws, it's illegal. And you see a life and a force and this thriving heartbeat that's there that at times I find here is taken for granted.
Okay, yeah.
And for me, this isn't my country. So I very much toe a line of, I'm not here to change anybody else, right? Like I'm not coming in to affect free will. I'm here to be myself, and for the people that are attracted to that and also want to be themselves and continue to be themselves as a unit, that's what I'm here to do. But the courage that I found to be able to do what I do here as an immigrant, as a Black man, and as a gay man comes from these countries that I've been to where I'm like, I don't even know how you began. Like in this thing right now that you're doing, you could go to jail, right? Like there's very real consequences within your country. And I come here and it's like, why not? And then I start to question myself as to, if I have this courageous voice, what were all the moments in my life that silenced it? And so as a Black man, it was silenced because of many things, from the miseducation that I received in my younger years, where I was really smart and I was in these advanced classes and not recognizing that being the only person of color in those advanced classes prepared me for a very white world that I did not recognize I was not given permission to be a part of. Okay. So with police and with the racism and with my own internalized racism that I then told myself, no, I can't speak up about this because this is how white people deals with it. So I guess the rest of the world deals with it this way. So this is how I'm always going to have to deal with it. And then as a queer person and HIV and AIDS and this abuse here and this, and there's even within the gay world, especially with gay men, there's a violence that's there that's never talked about because at the end of the day, you're men, right? You should get over it.
I was just wondering if there was, because there was, I don't know if you remember a moment in this where you decided to start going forth anyway, right? So you're naming these boxes and these barriers that were assumed. But at some point, obviously, because you're doing so much, at some point you made the decision, okay, I'm going to start pushing past this. I'm going to use a word that you used with me in a previous conversation. You talked about the importance of self-knowledge. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but this journey of knowing yourself and naming and declaring who you are despite all these things that you were taught. Can you tell us about that? Because that's, for me, that's like, that's like the start of the courageousness, the blossoming.
So I'm a mover and a shaker.
Yes.
That's all.
Were you always like that?
Always. Mom was always like, if you don't sit down. And I never broke anything, so there's never been any broken bones. I've been hit by a truck and still no broken bones.
Okay.
The cuts and the bangs and the bruises, I appreciated that energy. I think in recent years, I realized that that energy was fueled by a lot of anxiety growing up as existing while Black. But what came to a head was this figurative being hit by a truck. So 3 years ago, I hit a huge burnout. It came from a lot of the things that I talked about as far as like silencing myself, as far as being queer, silencing myself as far as being Black, and then even as an immigrant. There's an interesting quote that Jim Carrey actually had made about the difference between sadness and depression. And so sadness is this thing of like, I don't know, you go through a breakup, you go through whatever, you might think of a certain situation, but then after a certain while, it goes away and it's gone. With regards to depression, depression is your body saying the story that you've been telling yourself, it's not real. I don't believe it. You don't believe it. And so now we're going to sit here until we're able to unpack all of this. And it don't matter how long you think it's gonna take 2 hours. Oh no, baby. It's gonna take as long as I'm here for you to unpack all of this. And I had gone through that here in Vienna. So like when I originally showed up, I had this moment where, because I'd come here to visit a friend. And then that night I was going to the city center. So of course I asked, hey, what's the name of the city center? They go, Stephansplatz. And so I'm like, oh my God, that's cool. I go to the U-Bahn, I see the spelling. I'm like, oh, that's like my name. And so I get to Stephansplatz and there's Stephansdom. And it's like fixed, right? Like it's this thing. It's not the most amazing cathedral I've ever seen in my life, but it was this thing.
It's a thing. Yes.
It was around the time of Chris Kindlemark. So there's so many people and they're moving around everywhere. And at that point in my life, I kind of came to a fork in the road where I recognized that I was all of these people going in a million different directions. And where I wanted to get to was in the feeling of what I saw when I saw Stephansdom. I'm not quite at Stephansdom yet, but I realized that the burnout, depression wall that I hit 3 years ago was important for me to begin getting there.
Okay. And you said you wanted to come to the point of being as the Stephansdom, like this force in the middle of this chaos, or?
Just Vienna is a speed that I found that I liked for myself. Like New York was really fast and LA was a lot of fun. And there are all these places around the world that have a little bit of either one of those. But on my worst, craziest, fastest day, I can still sit down and tell you everything I did that day. I could not do that anywhere else. And so there were certain feelings of it's who I am. Like it really is my pace. It's the thing that I do. And I started realizing that just in being there in a week, I decided to move to Vienna within a week of being here. And that was just like infrastructure wise, because I lived everywhere, right? So like New York is hella expensive. So one, being in a place that is not hella expensive means that I have now money to invest in certain things. And then because of this thing, I have even more money to invest in certain things. And so me being able to invest in my art is a privilege that I have here that artists who are in the States could never, because they're working to just do the thing, which is the cost of living.
Right.
And so these little tiny things were like, okay, this is more you, this is more your speed and everything. But then there was a lot of things that I conveniently could run away from in the fun of life and being an artist that began to slap me in the face while being here. Racism in a way that I never realized how good I got at lying to myself about it happening to me.
Okay.
To me. And so, but my work before still was consistent, but now my work and the motivation are consistent because I realized that there was a lot of miseducation that I'd had in this kind of world that I built for myself, that during a time of COVID where everything got to slow down, I got to shift it in the other direction. And shifting into the other direction is real talk. Anytime I tell myself, is that something you sure? Are you sure you can say that? I don't know. You probably shouldn't. I just do now.
Okay. So just going with the urge.
Yeah, because I'd gone through a breakup also that at that time I was experiencing a ton of cyberbullying. It was coming at me in a way that felt also extra because I wasn't in the US, right? I didn't have my family, my friends, my people to be able to kind of filter through that. It was me and it was what's going on. It's so funny that you said this because I woke up this morning and I posted something on Instagram. It's so important that like I actually have to pull it up, but it says, one of the most important qualities to develop in life is determination. At some point, you just have to put your foot down and say, I'm going to move in this new direction and no person or situation is going to stop me. Great transformations need a beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I had this burnout, it was one of the scariest things in my life. I didn't even know if I would bring this up, but it was like dark night of the soul. I had the suicidal ideations. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
intent, but going to therapy helped me realize, okay, this is just ideation. This is not intent. I'm okay. I'm not crazy. I went deeper into myself because the world stopped spinning. Those lockdowns, people were like, oh my God, where's my fun? Where's this? I just went deeper inside because of another infrastructure that happens to be here in Austria, which is therapy
Mm-hmm.
at an affordable, like the most affordable rate. And so,
Really? I'm like, I haven't found that. We have to talk about that offline.
girl, I have the secrets, right? There were so many things that were happening. And I was just like, how did this happen? The original thing that I told you about me moving here, there's the idea of Stephane and Stephane's plots. And it just, nothing made sense. Nothing. I literally had a moment that in all of this breakup and everything that was happening, like I hadn't slept in like a week and a half.
Oh my
Like
God.
everything just showed up, right? Like every racist thing, every whatever from all the walks of my life that I just threw into sides of rooms as I still just tried to create authentically. And I just couldn't anymore. So I sifted through this whole Rolodex of friends and I landed on one person that I knew that I could say everything that I was going through at the time and they wouldn't worry. And that was what I mean. Like in this idea of courage, I realize this now, especially in the last year where I finally had the time to go back to the US and speak up to my people. It also takes practice. I don't just show up on a big stage and start saying the words that I'm saying. They really start from these minor conversations, these, hey girl, what you doing right now? Ah, cool. Okay, you up? Those are the moments where I can put the theory into practice. And then start to realize, oh, wow, there are also notes that come back from these people on what they're going through and being able to just get to a place then of like, okay, this feels good. This feels right. I understand this. This is me. This has other contexts that are in it, but it still feels authentically me. Now I speak.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that erupted from a place where I had no voice. Forget all the other people and the laws and the rules and the regulations that have silenced me. I silenced me. And I also have a choice in unsilencing me. And I think what makes the work that I do now and who I am this force, as you would say, and I feel it too. And I feel also very grounded by it right now versus overwhelmed by it, which was what I felt before, which is why I feel like I low-key was giving it away to other people and then realizing that like giving that force to other people also wields a lot of violence that I then also had to hold myself accountable for because I gave them those tools. But this force that I'm feeling right now comes from this place of, no, half of the things that I've told myself are just not true. And the parts that comes with the how dare you and you can't, and I'm like, watch me. Right? Like,
so I want to name some of these tools because my hope is that people that are listening to this will find inspiration to use their voices more courageously or maybe start something because we can't all juggle all these wonderful things like you are. But even if it's just one thing, you talked a lot about your support, your friends. You found a friend that could hold what you were going through. You had therapy. I'm wondering, was there anything else? Because you're talking about these decisions you made and this process of relearning who you are or finding more authenticity in how you want to share yourself. But is this something that you got just from therapy and a friend, or I'm sure you had your own processes where you're writing, journaling, or was it just the time and just the act of naming what you wanted and waiting? This is also a thing.
The first was time. I remember in the moment where I was at critical low that I found myself just asking the universe for more time. And this was about 3 months before Corona showed up. When one is depressed or down or any of this, it feels actually the world's spinning twice as fast than as it was before. And so that was the first part where I had time. And then I had this moment of observing myself of being like, well, you asked for this and this is what you're doing with it. And so that was probably the first 2 months of COVID. And then I just began to go, okay, there's so much that's in my head right now. How do I get it out? And so at the time with therapy, especially during COVID, they had given sessions of up to 5 days a week for free. And so it was just the act of what I call mental vomit, word vomit, of just getting things out and hearing it outside. There's things that can stay in here, but the minute they're out there, then I actually had to sort through it and deal with it. The other part, and these are really the first steps, and I kind of went from the first one back to the first one to the second one in between that. And then it took about a year then until I went to my people, because I then also had to figure out, who are my people? And so the more I informed myself of these things that were just in my head, I found moments where some of these voices were extremely negative and not good for me. And so then when I took those voices and I threw it along the smorgasbord of friends, I was able to pick out those and go, okay, that no longer serves me. So then I went in and cleared a lot of space that I had once made for everyone except for myself. I began to then really clear that out and make space for it. Then when I felt, okay, these are some people that I feel safe with, which is a privilege, right? Like, it's a privilege that to even have one friend, let alone what I can say is at least 10 friends that I could call at a moment's notice, and they would drop everything and have the ability to come to me. And that is a privilege that I then realized that I was not protecting, because I just put so many people in that space. And so then I had to go into a conversation with these people that I loved so dearly and begin to face a mirror of parts of myself that I didn't care to see. And so as I had these friends tell me the truth, made these friendships even more real, to be able to then feel like there are people that are there for you. And now from that, it's not just in the sense of doing my own thing. Education then is a part of it. It's crazy to think just this thing had happened 3 years ago, and some parts of that still carry some anxiety because it was only 3 years ago. But then it's like, I'm this far from it in 3 years. The big part of that is I find that I could easily go, this is really great. I'm now in a good place, you know what I mean? And I'm still learning, but that's the part now that I'm in where it's being myself in public. And I realized that is a lot more important than any of the work that I do, because the work is always in a conversation with the person that I am in public. And so
has this changed your creative work, do you think? I mean, I'm sure it has, but I guess I'll rephrase it. How has it changed?
It's changed my creative work because it's an interesting sight to see of people really finding a moment of being themselves. Like for the brunch, for example, I'm behind the bar. I'm the MC, the host. And so in the beginning, I give them this task of like, you're not in an Austrian theater or anything. You're not clapping in the beginning and clapping at the end. No, you're screaming at this human being throughout the whole thing. When they make you feel something, if they fall on the floor, if they do this, if they like, you just let it go. Like, right? And you see this like, yes, and like by the end, you have this like 52, 65, 25-year-old Austrian who would never, ever, and it's not even just the Austrian, that's just the beginning of it. There's a whole mix of people from all walks that are there, that are screaming and that are having fun and letting themselves go. And they walk away with that, right? If they want to give themselves a permission to be that way outside, yeah, because it's never about me, but at the same time, it is me. I am a representation of it. Also within that, I get to curate the things that I actually want to dialogue about. And so for me, stigma in the HIV AIDS community, it's huge. And I have so many friends of mine who are positive, just found out they're positive, have been positive for a very long time and still dealing with those types of things. So then to create a space where a positive person as a drag queen can run around and do whatever she wants and have people love it and not be scared of it, that's the beginning of that kind of work. Also with trans, also with all of, I only work within the cards that I have, and also recognize that that's enough. I don't have to change the world. I can create a small piece of it within myself and see how that continues to have its own effects with other people. My voice only gets amplified by everyone else's voice that also is singing in that same chorus. And within a chorus, because I did grow up as a little chorus nerd, you know, so there's the sopranos, there's the altos, there's the tenors, there's the basses. You can even split that into tenor 1, tenor 2, and there's different ways of how they come together. There's sometimes dissonance, right? There's sometimes these beautiful harmonies. There's full blast of the whole. That's a part of it too. Even though I'm in a curating phase, I also can be in a place where I'm learning as well. So these humans that I'm meeting, this past weekend, I stayed up with my drag artist till 6 a.m. and to hear what it is that I'm doing that's helping them and vice versa, and really just attempting to speak to this world. I think anyone that has a voice and is able to raise it in whatever way that they do, especially in the arts, that's amazing. And I think we really do need more of that. The work that I'm doing is, especially here, is giving a platform to people who want to do that, who have worked really hard to do that, and that have something unique that they have to say as well. Before, I would say that I'm the type of person who hands out lighters. In my life, as I go and I meet people, I just consider, here's a lighter, here's a lighter, here's a lighter. But before that, I went so far as to attempt to then light those lighters for all of those people, where it's like, that's actually not my job. There are people that will figure it out for themselves, and that's wonderful to bear witness to that. And I celebrate them for being able to do that. And that in some way also gives me more to hand out more lighters. But before, in trying to do that for everyone, I lost a huge sense of who I was.
Well, I love this sense of lighter. Actually, this is be a great part to wrap it up, because it's close to an hour already, and it's been a beautiful conversation. I'm loving some of this synchronicity and these moments, because I actually described you as a fire starter. I don't know. On my last few Instagram posts, I was like, the fire starter. But I love this, you're handing out the lighters.
That's Haiti in so many ways. Even with Vienna's burning randomly, there's so many parts of this determination, as I talked about, that comes with this country that, like, I come from it. I was born in it and I only lived there for 3 years, but there's so much of this tenacity of doing something, right? It might not even be the right thing, you don't know, but to really do something. And the Haitian call, so when you see someone else who's Haitian, immediately it's "sac passe," which is, you know, what's going on. And the response is "nap boule," like we're burning.
Nap boule. I love it. I love it. I love it.
That sense of, even within something that sounds crazy, which is to burn something to the ground, it's in creating new life.
Yes.
And that is a thing that I've learned to do for myself. And I feel that much more empowered when other people learn to do it for themselves versus relying on me to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the fire. I mean, this is such a beautiful sacred energy, and so many different traditions about the fire. But okay, so I want to talk more, but we have to end. Stephane, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Can you tell everyone where to find you if they want to find you online?
Yes. So on the Instagram, it's at Space Ghost 1985. And then Queen's Brunch, which is the drag brand that's here in Vienna, is at Queen's Brunch Vienna. And then as far as Austria's major voguing ball, that is at Vienna is Burning.
Okay. And if somebody wants to come to the drag brunch in Vienna, when is it?
It always happens on Saturdays. There's usually a show at 12 and another show at 3 p.m. The shows are 2 hours each. All you can eat buffet, bottomless mimosas, which is orange juice and champagne put together. And the Instagrams are really the best way of finding out what's going on. But we also have a Facebook as well. So if you look at Queen's Brunch, Vienna, or Vienna's Burning, you'll find all the things there.
Okay, wonderful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Connect.Faith, for making this all possible. And yeah, we look forward to the next time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd be totally down to be back.
Yes.
Thank you for having me, really. Thank you.
Yes.
The Courageous Voice podcast is a collaboration between Connect.Faith and me, Shanda Rule. Music is by Ike Sturm and production by Jess Burchett. Thanks for listening.